Okay, it's wet finishing bamboo scarves. Take two. Sorry about last week. My microphone must have run out of charge in the middle of shooting, and I just didn't notice, and I didn't check all the way through. But this is better because now I will get to reveal some things that I had not realized last weekend. And I had not realized them because I had only wet finished one of the three scarves, the one I wove in the middle of the series of three. This is the one with the cherry, the red weft. So now I have twisted the fringe on all three of the scarves. Of course, this red one is completely done. I have trimmed off all the little tails and with a final pressing to uh, clean up some of these edges that aren't as tidy as I would like them to be. It's done. The first one I wove with the turmeric weft, which is the orange color, uh, has got twisted fringe and it has not been wet finished yet. And the one over here all the way on the left is the last one I wove. So it started off shorter than the other two. Um, and yeah, it is still damp. I took it out of the washing machine this morning and I have pressed it uh, to, to remove some of the wrinkling that the spin cycle causes, but it is still damp, which is why it's sitting rolled up on this green thing. I don't want to risk getting moisture on my laminated tabletop and having the wood underneath it swell. Okay, so what have we learned? What have I learned from this series of scarves? First, I have learned that it makes an awful lot of sense to plan your hem stitching before you do it so that when you twist the fringe, everything is set up in the proper bundles as you would like them to be. So, what do I mean by proper bundles? As I said, this was the first scarf that I wove, the one with the turmeric weft. And I honestly just didn't think about the hem stitching before I did it. I've got these nice little stripes, and there are 29 of them, which is a number that's going to become important in a moment. And each color has 12 ends in it. So when I hem stitched, I went over 4 warp ends and up 2, leaving me with 3 strands, 3 bundles. Sorry, yeah, 3 total bundles in each warp stripe. This meant that oh, and also this is not only the one I wove the first, what feels like months ago now and probably was, it is also the one where I twisted the fringe last. So this, of course, the red one was the one where I twisted the fringe first and wove second. And I'm pretty sure when I did the hem stitching on this one, I had already realized that maybe I set myself up badly on the orange scarf and needed to retool because this one, when I hem stitched, I went 3 threads over and 2 threads up, and that left me with 4 bundles in each grouping. And I want to zoom in as close as I can possibly get to. Okay, so that's really close. Sorry, my hands look huge now. Okay, so you can just barely see that there are 2 and 2 little hem stitched groups twisted with 2 and 2 little hem stitched groups in this light gold. And in fact, you can see it most easily here. So this one worked out really smoothly. I had consistently sized bundles all the way across my scarf because that 29 times 4 gave me an even number. And uh, that worked out just the way I wanted. However, on my orange scarf, where I did 3 and 3, I started fringe twisting at one edge and realized pretty quickly, oh, I've got an odd number of bundles and I'm not going to be able to twist 2 and 2 in each from each color stripe. So What I had to do instead was less pleasant to my eye, which loves symmetry and uniformity more than almost anything else. It's a little embarrassing. So, what I ended up doing, because I had three bundles, three hemstitch bundles in each color stripe, was I did two complete stripes together. And notice the difference. Notice how the bundles are bigger. Sorry, the hemstitching collect the twisted fringe is fatter than on the red scarf because it's got twice as many threads in it, or almost twice as many. I can't do the math on the fly in my brain right now. And when I got to the center, I had an odd bundle. So this one just got twisted on itself. Uh, so if I had planned all this before I did any of the hem stitching, if I had thought it through, I would have known, okay, I want to break up each set of 12 warp ends in the same color into an even number of groupings instead of an odd number of groupings, and it would have come out evenly all the way across. Uh, Notice something else. Because these groups in each twisted fringe are longer, the fabric is buckling because it's just too wide. I mean, it's going to be fine. It is fine. It'll wash out. It will loosen up into something beautiful. But I still wish that I had thought about this before I did things. So again, to compare, let's see if I can get everybody in frame here. My orange scarf has wider sets going into each twisted fringe group than my cherry scarf. So that was one of the big things I had probably known, but just hadn't thought about when I started weaving these scarves, and I should have. It would have made a big difference. So now that we're twisted, and now that everybody's twisted, and I have completely finished the cherry scarf, let's survey how all three of them compare. So I want to start by showing you the difference in in what happens to this bamboo yarn before it is washed and after wet finishing on the gentle cycle of the washing machine. And forgive me again if I'm repeating stuff that you could hear in last week's video. Sorry about that. It was a week ago. I don't remember what I said. Also, I didn't watch the whole video all the way through to see where things cut out. Okay, so on this scarf, which hasn't been wet finished, my twisted fringe ends in very clean looking yarn. But look at the difference between that yarn and this yarn. On my burgundy weft scarf, where it's just come out of the washing machine, if I had not twisted my fringe before I threw everything in the washing machine, I would not have been able to twist the fringe because the whole length of the fringe area would have been snarled together like this. So on the red scarf, the finished one, I just laid it on my cutting mat. I got out my quilter's ruler with the lipped edge. I lined everything up on this cutting mat, and I just took my little doohickey thing, my rotary cutter, my giant rotary cutter, and I trimmed everything off. You can also see when you look very closely at the one I've trimmed already that there are going to be slight variations in where I put the knot on each edge, but the eye doesn't really notice that. What the eye notices is the cut edge. So there's diminishing returns from stressing yourself out over, oh my God, I have to have that knot in the bundle in the exact same location every time. Honestly, nobody's likely to notice that. Another thing you'll see is that the process of wet finishing take some of the twist out of the twisted fringe. So for instance, I should have twisted this one a bit more when I was doing it. And a last thing I want to say about twisted fringe before I move on to other topics is the fatter each group of twisted fringe is, the longer the ends need to be to create, because they're wrapping around each other, but they're wrapping around a bigger diameter. So if you want a really chunky twisted fringe, leave even more than the, I think 4 inches, maybe 6 inches was what I had to work with. And again, this is stuff I just hadn't paid attention to when I trimmed the fringe on this scarf and trimmed it at the same length as the other scarves with their smaller twisted fringe groupings. So a last thing I want to show you before I move on to a different video on a different topic has to do with, again, how I planned for my wet finish. So you may recall that before I wanted to put these scarves into the washing machine, I trimmed any weft ends and any warp ends, and now I have to look for one, so this is going to take me a sec. I trimmed them to about 1 inch in length instead of leaving them super, super long. And I did that for two reasons. One was I didn't want a really, really long weft end or just yarn end in general to wrap itself around the scarf during the washing process, because that would, I've done this before. That could stretch out that one super long thread and cause puckers in the fabric, which are easy enough to fix, but it's better if they don't happen to begin with. The other reason I trimmed stuff down to about 1 inch instead of all the way to the surface of the fabric is that the qualities of the scarf change after the fabric is wet finished. So on this orange scarf, which is completely dry, it's almost impossible to wave it around like this. It is just stiff. It's stiffer. If I hold it over my hand, you can see how it drapes or doesn't drape. Whereas when I do this, the same thing on my dry scarf, look at the difference. See how it's just drooping? And that is because the wet finishing process just collapsed everything together. It shrank, and that'll be the subject of my next video, is how to think about shrinkage as you're planning a project. It shrank, it fluffed up the yarn, it changed the whole character of this fabric. And if I had trimmed all the way to the surface of the fabric before I put the scarf in the washing machine, there's a chance that I actually would have created holes in the woven fabric from that shrinking process. It's also possible that the fluffing that happens in wet finishing would have filled in that hole, but I don't want to take that chance. So now, after I let this scarf dry, it will be much easier for me to spot every place where I left a 1-inch tail sitting. Zoom in even closer, where I left a 1-inch tail sitting because it has fuzzed up a little bit. And now I can take my snips and just trim it very close to the fabric. And now I don't have to worry about leaving a hole behind. So that is wet finishing and what it can do for your hand woven projects, and why it's so important to plan before your woven fabric hits the washing machine.